Hello, I'm going to talk about the update coming up in June, update 46, the season of the Worm Cult, and how that is going to change trials groups and dungeon groups in terms of penetration and what sets are still going to be necessary or even viable at that point. Because there are a lot of changes that have been introduced that I think are probably going to stay now that we are past the week 4 of the PTS or so. And so let's get into it and talk about what's changing. Optimally, the uh, best DPS combination seems to be the Necromancer with the Arcanist pairing, and you can mix in other classes with that, but the top tier seems to be either a Nightblade or a Templar to pair with that. But I know there are a lot of other combinations being used. But let's just talk about the Necromancer and Arcanist here for a bit. As you can see on my screen here, I'm using the email thing because I don't have a nice notepad here in the game to be able to make notes. But the Necromancer Dismember passive is being changed. Currently it is 1500. This is going to be going up to 3270. And the Arcanist Splintered Secrets passive, currently I believe it is about 991 per skill. That is also going up to 1240 per skill slotted. We'll go over that again here in a minute when I get to adding up totals. The Velothi Mage's Amulet, which everybody pretty much wears on an Arcanist, and other damage over time classes such as the Necromancer or even Dragon Knight or whatever. Even Templars have been pretty good with Velothi on it. It's a very good mythic, but this also gives you 1,650 penetration. You get a blue CP passive of piercing of 700, and then if you wear one piece of light armor, you get 939 penetration. Now you can see what total penetration is with all this. Now the one caveat that you might not be seeing here that adds up to 9,039 penetration on a DPS. You're going to have two Herald of the Tome skills slotted on your bar. You're going to have a flail and a beam. So that is actually 2,480 penetration, not the 1240, because it's per skill slotted. So what does that mean for uh, tanks, for example? Well, Major Breach equals 5,948. Minor Breach equals 2,978. I believe it's 74, actually. Now I'm questioning myself. Um, so, with that in mind, yes, it's 74. So, with Major Breach and Minor Breach together, and the 9,939, you're sitting at 17,961 penetration with just Major and Minor Breach. So there's only 239 remaining after that, which is essentially nothing. So let's talk about what that means for gear sets for trials. Everybody's old, tried and true from Mav Lorcage, Roar of Alkosh, that strips 6,000 armor. No longer necessary. Everybody's going to be passively at penetration cap. Okay? Also, Tremor Scale, not needed. One of my favorite sets, Crimson Oath, not necessary. Virtually anything that strips armor is not needed. And in case you're wondering, okay, well, what about that 239? That's going to be dependent on whether or not the DPS is wearing any kind of gear set that has a line of penetration in it. For example, I really like the Runecarver set, but it's got that line of penetration in there that when you gold it out, it ends up being 1,478 on that fourth line there. That means you're going to be over pen by 1,239 if that's true. The new craftable set, the Tideborn craftable set that's coming out, it has a line of pen, and that also might be very popular because it buffs your direct damage by 12%, and that was one of the changes that they implemented in week 4 of the PTS, is they changed all beams to be direct damage. So this, for example, coming up in update 46, this weapon right here is going to be extremely more useful because you put this on your back bar and it's going to buff your direct damage by 12% for 18 seconds. Another thing you can look at buffing your direct damage on your beams is running a lightning staff with this ancient knowledge. Lightning staffs buff, I'll just pop both numbers in there. Lightning staffs buff direct damage and channels by 12%. So you could put that two-handed sword on the back bar with a lightning staff on the front, and you've got 24% buffed damage to your beam. And then if you put that craftable set on, that's another 12. So you're up to 36% increased damage to your beam. Outside of any other buffs, that's probably going to be a really nasty combination. A couple of other things to look at set-wise. They have absolutely nerfed the crap out of Pearls of El Nafi. Unfortunately, healers are no longer going to be getting unique ultimate for this. They are going to get Major Heroism instead, which really sucks because the Trample gives Major Heroism, so now you can't just generate ultimate like you used to. There is a monster set here in the game that does pretty well. I will cover that maybe in another video. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that because I don't want them to touch it, and I don't really want to talk about stuff to get nerfed. So another set that got nerfed in the patch notes for week 4, Pillager's Prophet, got a 60% nerf to their ultimate that it generates. So the thing that teams I think are going to need the most are going to be recoveries and shielding, because they're losing out on tankiness from their tank line and recoveries from their healing skill line, and they're going to pack just all damage skill lines in, and they're going to be missing that. So I'll go over that in another video, but this video was mainly just to talk about gear sets that are no longer kind of going to be as usable, somewhat necessary, but the gear sets for sure that are not going to be necessary are the stuff that assisted in stripping armor from the enemies, Another couple of things, if everybody is going to run, for example, I'm on a Necromancer right now. If everybody is going to run the Gravelord's Sacrifice on their DPS, you're going to have 8 DPS that have access to the Frozen Glacial Colossus, excuse me. This gives major vulnerability for 20 seconds. It's a fairly cheap ultimate. So you could have up to 3 DPS run this, and you don't need. A couple more gear sets are going away. You no longer need Turning Tide. And a good buddy up here, Nazare, which one of the main purposes of running this was to extend the major vulnerability buff. You no longer need this because you can have up to 3 people. By the time that third Colossus gets done, the first guy is probably going to have their ultimate back up again to just hit another Colo. Another set that's going to be kind of not as necessary. Now, this is not to say that there are not going to be situations and teams or whatnot that don't need these sets, but if a team is built like I'm planning out in my head how that's going to sit, you're not going to need Archdruid anymore either. So there's a couple of really different situations there where I'm going to say, maybe Lord Warden adding resistance to your team is a optimal choice to use for an off tank to stand in group, pulling in minis on boss fights or during ad pulls. Stand close to the group and get the orb to drop on the group to give them the resistance of this to help with keeping people alive so they can kill stuff and do damage. Healers, in my opinion, the best two to run on healers, Ozazon the Inferno and the Blind. This gives a shield right here, and Ozazon gives 2 different buffs depending on what the situation is. If you overheal the target, you get armor. If you're just healing them, you give them minor vitality, which helps you get them up to full health again, and then it also increases any damage shields that they have on them. So those are a couple of things to consider. Recovery set wise, in my opinion, there's 2 really good ones to choose from. The best, absolute bar none, recovery set in the game is Stonetalker's Oath. I would honestly put War Machine on a couple of support DPS and get rid of the Rojo build and run this on the back bar instead. And then pair the Zoran set with Stonetalkers. That's going to be a really powerful setup. And then I'll probably do a build video on that a little bit later, or down the road I should say. And then Pillagers and Pearls being busted. SPC from White Gold Tower is still an excellent set. This is better to run this than Olorime because this is mobile. A lot of times when you have a lot of AoE and people running around in group, Olorime is not a real great choice to use. I know it's nice to have that 20-second buff of Major Courage, but this is much better. You're going to have much better uptime on the Major Courage buff to keep this up rather than running the Olorime set. That is easier to run, I will grant you that, but it's not as effective in a trial with everybody running around. What to pair with that, I would suggest Kind's Aegis, the Perfected Kind's Wind. They are changing this to proc on overheals to grant the recoveries. So this is going to be another really good set, I think, going forward. to grant recoveries, because another thing that they're doing is they're increasing the cost of skills. The Arcanist beam got a 40% increase to how much it costs to run that. The Templar beam, the Radiant Oppression and Radiant Destruction, they are extending that from a 1.8 second channel to a 3.8 second channel, and it, rather than having a set flat cost, it costs per tick, so it's pretty draining. The other thing that is changing, the banner is no longer going to just drain resources like it says on the bottom right there, reducing your health, magicka, and stamina recovery by 33%. They're taking that away, and instead it is going to cost resources every second, or I believe it's every 2 seconds, that you have it active. So you could run into a situation where your DPS's banner is shutting off because they run out of resources. So it's going to be really important to give your team resistances and resources in this new update. So those are a couple of things to think about. I think I've covered just about everything that I can think of. But there's a lot of sets that are going to be not as useful anymore, and a couple of them that are kind of coming into play. The other set from Imperial City, this Scathing Mage set, could be really good on a magicka build, because it's going to buff direct damage, or excuse me, it's procced off of direct damage, and it's going to probably be proccing quite a bit. Maybe they'll change that 2-piece item line to include weapon damage. That would be really nice if they did that, to make this set really kind of fit on either a mag or a stam build. They've done that in the past with some other sets where they adjust an item line on something. Maybe hopefully they'll do that, but we'll see what happens there. That would be a really good set to pair with. But the Null Arca set also got buffed out of Lucent Citadel. This is going to be, I think, a really good set going forward. It's the damage has been buffed, and the cooldown has been shortened as well, to where you can get stacks 4 seconds after it fires rather than 5, and they also increase the damage that it's doing. And I think probably people are going to be running just about 60% critical chance in most cases if they build right. And then the passive from Necromancer is going to give you critical chance in execute. The Death Knell passive here is going to give you 20% critical chance once the enemy gets down below 25%. So in a boss fight, that could be quite a long fight depending on which trial you're doing. But that's going to be upwards of 80% critical chance without even really pushing for like a precise weapon or anything like that. If you're running the Thief Mundus with Divine's gear and just medium armor and all that, you're going to be sitting at 60% critical chance. So crit damage is going to be capped out pretty easily. There's not going to be a necessary Warhorn might, for example, not even be necessary. I don't think it is, actually, because you can just run 100% crit damage at all times, as I've done in a video before. You can check that out on my channel if you haven't seen it. Just look for the the critical damage, 125% critical damage at all times. It's in my trials folder, I believe is where I put it. But that is my video for today. Thanks for watching. Check out my channel for all the other stuff that I've done if you like it. Take a look at the other videos I've done and see if I can help you out with any other information. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.